The iPad is quickly becoming the staple device for the modern day student. Before it was the laptop, but as the iPad ecosystem grows and the operating system itself as well, we have to continuously ask ourselves, can the laptop be replaced by the iPad? And is it really the best buy for students? Hey guys, Archie here, a second year medical student, and on this channel we focus on learning how to learn so that we can be more intentional with our time to spend it on the things and people that matter most to us. One of the things that I imagine that is very important for a lot of students is having the right tools on hand. I always want to make sure that I'm using things that don't slow me down, which is why I'm always considering things like the iPad Pro. So today we're discussing which of the latest iPads is going to be the right one for you, even if you do need one. I've got timestamps below, but we're going to be going through why you need an iPad. What's the new things about the iPad Pro 2021 M1 edition itself? Should I go for the iPad Air or should I go for the Pro? The accessories, and then specifically at the end, which of these two is going to be the best for you. So let's begin by talking about why you need the new iPad. As you probably already realized, the iPad is really good for portability. Something as thin as just this is a lot better than carrying a huge pile of textbooks around in your backpack. I remember back in year 11 when I didn't have the iPad, and routinely I would get a sore back just by carrying how many textbooks I had in my bag. So iPads are a great solution for that. Now the other thing as well is when you start taking digital notes, that is a complete game changer in terms of the things that you can do. It's just incredibly easy to use digital notes when you start looking at using these things on the iPad. For example, I can just pick up this piece of text and then move it around wherever I want. That's not something that you can actually do on paper, obviously. Now another thing as well is that if I write something like my name, you can actually use Control F. So you can use the search function here to actually see where is Archer on what page it's on. So there is that little bit of handwriting to text recognition on this sort of software as well, which is kind of game changing. Now I don't really write too many words or notes on Notability anymore anyway, just because I'm more of a fan of mind mapping now. But for this, if this is the type of thing that you do, it's just really good. So what I'm saying again is just that note-taking experience is just a lot easier. You treat this like paper, but with just the extra benefits of it being digital. And again, as well as you have this multi-purpose stylus that can just do so many things. You can do whatever you want with it. Now, this isn't really a good reason, but if you're into trends and doing the same thing as everyone else, well, the iPad is becoming one of those trends now, especially within the medical student sphere. Basically, I'd say over 50% of medical students now have iPads and stuff. Now, as well, the iPad is an entertainment powerhouse, but that is not what we're really talking about in this video. It's also just a huge convenience just to be able to whip out your iPad and then be able to write on it, which is just one of the things that I love about it. And the fact that you just have everything in one spot. Like, I don't need to go and look through folders and folders and folders just to find something. I can use that Control F feature. And as well, the great thing about this is just the straight up versatility and adaptability of the iPads. You can do as much as you want with these things, almost to the same degree as laptops. It's just a digital device. You can access the internet and have all these apps and stuff where you can use all the power that it gives you. Okay, so if we start to talk about some things that are new, with the new iPad Pro 12-inch, there's actually a new display on here. We've actually got that XDR mini LED screen now. Now, in both of these, they actually have the new M1 chip, which is something that they've taken from the newest MacBooks out there as well. The M1 chip is made by Apple. It's a proprietary processor, which is just in itself just ridiculously fast. Now, when we're talking about students, unless you're someone who does video editing or any sort of strong processing, using some of those strong processing apps, this isn't really going to be something that matters to you too much. I have noticed that compared to my old iPad to this, apps load a little bit faster, you can import PDFs faster, but really that sort of time doesn't add up too much. Or at least it doesn't add up to the price difference between the iPad Air and the iPad Pro. We've also got a better camera on here, and you've also got, again, the LiDAR scanner, but as well, there's more RAM in this, and it's just a very, very strong device. And it's very strong in terms of its processing power and speed. As well, we've got the new Thunderbolt port here, which just means it can transfer data a lot quicker as well. And if you do happen to think about getting the cellular edition, which I don't imagine a lot of students actually are going to need, but there is 5G instead of 4G now available. So let's talk about the key question. Should you actually even consider the Pros or just look at the iPad Air? So let's take a look at the price comparison between the base models of the iPad Air versus the 11-inch iPad Pro. So the iPad Air comes in at $899, whereas the iPad Pro 11-inch actually comes in at $1,199. So we've got that difference of around $300 there. So the similarities between the two is that you've got the same sort of front face. The only difference is with the iPad Pro, the bezels are actually going to be a slight bit bigger. You still got the flat edges, and the battery life is amazing on both of them anyway. In terms of accessories, which is an important thing when you start to consider the newest iPads, the keyboard and the Apple Pencil is exactly the same across the Air and the Pro. Now, when we take a look at some of the differences, we'll start to notice that firstly, this has a much faster processor. But when I say it's much faster, again, like you don't even really notice the speed differences unless you're doing some really intensive things on some certain apps like video editing or like Photoshop, for example. So the iPad Pro is meant for professionals, which is why it's going to have that M1 processor, which has more RAM as well. The Pro also has a better microphone and 4 speakers to give that stereo sound rather than 2 on the Air. I also think that's not going to be too important in terms of swaying a student's decision. Now, the big difference is that just kind of deters me away from the iPad Air is the Face ID versus Touch ID situation. On the iPad Pro, you have Face ID, which is a great thing. It's very good at detecting your face and just getting into it. But however, if you have the iPad Air, you've actually got to press your finger on the power button, and that is a sensor for Touch ID. Depending on what sort of case you have, that can be quite hard to reach if your iPad is actually just sitting on the table. So it might be something to consider. The Pro has a brighter screen. Again, doesn't matter too much unless you're really in the sun. And again, there's that better camera on the Pro, and the iPad Air comes in different colors for whatever that's worth. And the base model of the Pro actually comes with double the storage with 128 gigs compared to 64 on the Air. In terms of real world performance, not much separates the two. Sure, it's a slightly nicer experience on the Pro just because you got that little bit of extra speed, but doesn't really make a big difference in terms of the use cases that you'll be using it for as a student. So it really starts to depend on your budget, whether you have the $300 extra to burn to get the Pro versus the Air or not. In the large majority of cases, I am going to have to recommend the iPad Air for students compared to the iPad Pro. If you're considering using the iPad Pro for use cases like video editing, you might as well just go for the MacBook Air because it's going to be a similar price once you factor in all the accessories that you're going to have to get with the iPad. And even still, there's a few like keyboard shortcuts and stuff that you'll just be slightly more efficient on a laptop compared to the iPad, even though the distance between iPads and laptops is becoming increasingly smaller and smaller. And there are expected updates to the iPad OS, which is going to really make that a very difficult decision, even more so soon on. So let's start talking about accessories, because kind of if you're thinking about using the iPad, you're gonna need the Apple Pencil just to start off with anyway. And depending if you wanna use this to write assignments and stuff, you probably will consider the keyboard as well. So the price of just the Apple Pencil itself is $200. So this is pretty much a must-have that you need if you're gonna think about note-taking with the iPad. You can buy a Logitech version, but it doesn't connect as nicely as this. And if you're spending this much money on an iPad anyway, you might as well just go for it. Now, there's actually two sort of keyboards that you can get. So I've got one of them here, which is the newest one, the Magic Keyboard, which has a really nice keyboard. And your iPad kind of floats on it. And it's pretty sturdy, but the only things that I would say about this that is a disadvantage is that when it holds it like this and does like the counterweight, it's actually quite heavy. So this actually weighs as heavy as just a normal laptop. And this is the 12.9 edition. So, I mean, if you look at these two keyboards here, this one actually costs $449, whereas the bigger one costs $549. As you can see, that's quite hefty for a keyboard. So you might want to just consider the original one that I had with my current older iPad, which is just a smart keyboard folio. The keyboard is nowhere near as nice and there's not as many viewing angles, but it's extremely portable. And it's quite easy as well to just flip it out to write your notes. So I'll show you what I mean. With this current keyboard, it's really good if you want to start using this more like a laptop. But the only issue is that look how difficult it is for me to get out the iPad so I can then eventually go into Notability to write some stuff. And then if I want to go backwards, this is so much effort as well, and it's a two-hand maneuver, takes quite a while, and then I can put it away. So if you compare this to my actual 2018 iPad, look how quickly I can just whip it open and get started. And then alternatively, it's quite easy for me to just flick it back and keep going. So all in all, it's just like extremely quick. It's extremely quick on this cheaper keyboard. And so this keyboard actually costs $269. Now with the older iPads, I usually went for the non-Apple editions because there was never an Apple edition like the Logitech ones and things like that. And they are also good options if you want to consider those. So which iPad Pro is for you? Well, both of them have the same internals. They both pack the same amount of power. So the iPad 11 has some advantages. It's a lot more lightweight than the 12.9, and it's a lot more portable for that reason. It's also significantly cheaper, $450 difference between the base models between these two iPads. Whereas with the 12.9, you've got a lot more real estate on this screen. It's about the same size as an A4 piece of paper, so that might be a really good way for you to transition to something like this. It also has that brand new display, which is just a little bit nicer looking and brighter, and you get a better sized keyboard, which is much more similar to what it is on a laptop. Now, more things to add on top of that, I actually think the 12.9 can really reasonably replace a laptop because you've got that much screen real estate that it looks like a laptop, and the keyboard as well. So if you're thinking of using your iPad more like a laptop, then I would definitely go for the 12.9. However, if you're just really going for note taking, I would just say that the 11 inches is perfectly fine, because like you're not going to be really worried too much about the screen real estate here and trying to do tons of multitasking and stuff that you might do on a 12.9 inch. However, again, because it's a smaller iPad, the keyboard experience isn't as great. I actually don't think it's much of a compromise in terms of note taking with just the smaller screen, because instead of writing like this, you just flip it like this, and now it's the same width as a A4 piece of paper, and that's perfectly fine. There's just a little bit more scrolling, but that's not really an issue. So overall, the iPad 11 is going to be for those who are more interested in a budget option and are just fine with not having that bigger keyboard and screen real estate. But if you are one of those people who needs it, then you might want to think about the 12.9 inch. Although if you're thinking about the 11 inch, you might want to consider it more equally with the Air instead. All right, so that's it. If you want to see my other videos on the MacBooks, make sure to go check that out, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.